Good afternoon. I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All. Thank you for joining us. We're here on 1650 AM here in a beautiful sunny day. We're live here at K-Talk Radio, and phone number is 454-1650. That's 454-1650 if you want to call in. And I've got a great guest here today for the next hour. Her name is Jennifer Atkinson. She's an attorney practicing law in Norfolk, and she's an elder law specialist. She's a graduate of the William & Mary College and also the William & Mary Law School in 1999. So for the last 15 years or so, 16, I guess, Ms. Atkinson has been practicing law with the Hogg Law Group in Norfolk. And that's www.hogglaw.com. And she's an estate planning expert and an elder law expert. And so welcome to the show, Jennifer Atkinson.
Thank you, George.
Anyway, so, here we are. We're talking to an elder law specialist. Those of you that are, listening today are thinking, well, let's see, elder law, how old am I? Do I need to go see an elder law specialist? We all have older parents. We're all going to get old someday ourselves, we hope. So I guess my first question to an elder law expert is, why does somebody need an elder law lawyer? What's your typical client who comes in to see you, Jennifer?
Okay. Well, first of all, there is the, as you mentioned, I focus on both the estate planning and the elder law. There are things that people need to be doing even when they do not consider themselves elderly. And I do get people of all ages, but also people do sometimes think of it more when they're older, that they need to make sure these documents are up to date. Their will, their health care powers of attorney, their regular powers of attorney, living will, and now the digital assets are also becoming an issue as well. The other way people will approach me is sometimes typically somebody coming in because they're concerned about a parent or a loved one who is reaching a point where they're becoming concerned about either how they're going to make sure they're taken care of, or some of the decisions they're seeing. So it can be the individual. When it's the individual themselves, they're usually coming in talking estate planning. When it's the child, it might be more concerns about things they're observing.
If you've just joined us, this is Justice for All, and our number again is 454-1650. If you have a question for Jennifer Atkinson, who's an elder law expert, give us a call, 454-1650, and she's live here with me in the studio today. It's kind of nice having you here so often. My guests on the show are by telephone from somewhere, so it's great having a guest actually sitting here across from me here in the studio. So, well, and when someone comes to see you, they got to get their will in place. They're going to get you do a lot of estate planning, wills, and trusts. Tell us a little bit about the person. I mean, a lot of people, my guess is many people do not have a will or an estate plan in place. They just think, well, nobody planned. I think I heard once that everyone is surprised. Everyone is surprised by their own death. So, so no one wants to plan for their own death. It's kind of creepy, isn't it? But we all do need wills. Why does someone need a will and an estate plan in today's world?
There is actually a state statutory default if you don't have a will, that there might be a few people out there who really have nobody that they care anything about, who might say, might feel like that's adequate. It is inadequate for most people, particularly in the age now of blended families, and you and your spouse probably do not have all the same kids, or more so and more so. And with other things going on, it would also not cover the situation of what happens if you're alive but can't take care of the things you need to take care of. So at a minimum, even if you're 18, have nothing to your name, you still need to have the power of attorney and the medical directive. And we've got graduations coming up around the corner, and what some people may not be thinking of is pack the kid off to college. They go and either get sick or have an accident or do some of the things that many of us did in college, and something happens and there's a medical issue. If they're 18, you can't find out anything unless you have that piece of paper to be able to come and help your child.
So everybody over the age of 18 needs to have certain documents. What are they, and what does that entail when somebody comes to get? Again, you need to have a will, you need to have a health directive. What is that?
Well, it really has two parts. Sometimes they're separate documents. This state statutory form actually puts them together. There's the Advanced Medical Directive, which is typically reads 99% of people that I've had it read about this way, which is if I am in a state where I am not coming back, I am not going to return to a cognitive life. I do not have any reasonable possibility of that. I want comfort care, keep me comfortable, but I don't want care that's just going to prolong the process of me dying.
And if somebody doesn't have that, what's the result?
Well, a number of years back, the most infamous one was the Terry Schiavo case, but there've also been several others in Virginia that have had some notoriety where people were kept on for years and years with nasty family battles that end up in the press, and most people really, really do not want that. So that's the medical directive part. Then you have the healthcare power of attorney part, where you're appointing agents to say, okay, I'm not in that situation. I may come back, but I can't make any decisions if I'm in a situation where I can't make decisions or can't communicate them in any way. These are the people to go to decide what happens.
And that would be a family member generally, or a trusted advisor?
Yeah, typically family members, or else a close friend.
Now, this is, if you've just joined us, this is Justice for All. I'm with Jennifer Atkinson, and she's with the law firm of Hogg Law in downtown Norfolk, and her email address is jatkinson@hogglaw.com. Is that right?
Yes.
And there's an elder law newsletter that you can get if you go to her website at www.hogglaw.com. And if you have a question, it's 454-1650, and the lines are open. So, what is the other the person that comes to see you? That would be, we just talked about the typical, let's say, 18 to 60-year-old person, I suppose, or 70-year-old person who's really not elderly yet, at least let's hope not. And they're basically coming to settle their own affairs. At what point does somebody come in to see you, let's say, about an elderly parent, and what are the concerns that they have?
I had one recently that approached me. Her mother is needing round-the-clock care in her home, and is going to, at some point, it looks like, possibly burn through all her money. And we were talking about ways to be able to arrange to use some techniques to protect some of that money, so that it doesn't all get burned through before she can get some Medicaid to help her out eventually. And she had an older power of attorney, so it didn't have all the powers we were going to need, so we would have needed a conservatorship. That's the problem. If your power of attorney is not there or not adequate, somebody's got to come in and petition a court to get the additional powers that you would need. Now, that family has not decided exactly what they're going to do yet, but that's the general path, is to make sure we have the ability to use the techniques, and then do what we can to protect some assets so that they're available to someone. Because once you're on Medicaid, you've got, they leave you basically $2,000 in assets that you can still have, and $40 in monthly income you can still have for extras. Now, when you have a community spouse and you're married, then you have a lot more to play with. There's about I want to say $112,000 up to that the community spouse can have. It's half of the assets, and there's a lower floor and an upper ceiling, and the upper ceiling, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's north of $100,000.
Yeah, I always thought that the main reason people went to an elder law lawyer was because, let's say, elderly mom had a home with some equity in it, and maybe Junior and the other kids wanted, to have some kind of inheritance, and they wanted to still be able to take care of mom and take advantage of the Medicare or Medicaid payments, yet at the same time preserve that asset. Is that what you do to preserve the asset, for inheritance purposes? Or are you supposed to be preserving the assets just so there's enough money there for the care of the elderly person?
Most people, I have heard of people who are coming in because they feel like that's their inheritance, and that's part of it. And legacy is sometimes part of it. And when people are cooperating or coming in themselves, that could be certainly a part of it. Most of the people who have approached me were also thinking that they were going to use some of that. They were trying to make sure, or there might have been a disabled child in the family that they wanted to make sure, and those transfers can be done without a Medicaid penalty. But mostly trying to make sure that everything could be done so that there would be a resource there. Most of them just don't. Most people who've approached me, fortunately, and I know certainly there are people out there who are not that way, they care about the parent first and then the legacy.
Right, and it's probably not too fun sitting around with younger children, and all it looks like is they're just kind of greedy, and all they're really caring about is for themselves as opposed to their parents. But one of my, I was over at my dad's house the other. I've got a 91-year-old dad who's still living in his own home, and he's been on my show a couple of times, and he's really still spry and getting around okay. But another gentleman was visiting, and he made a comment how so many people that he knows, he's younger than my dad, but there are so many people today that have absolutely nothing saved for retirement or anything else. So the cost of nursing care, the cost of health care for the elderly is just gone through the roof.
Yes.
What do these people do, for instance, these elders that don't have any assets?
If they really have no assets, they can probably get the Medicaid. Now the trick is getting the Medicaid bed can be a little difficult. It really helps to be able to get in there and pay a few, private pay a couple of months and have the bed and be in there. That seems to help.
How do you get paid? I mean, as an attorney, you're charging fees, I guess, of the family to do the will and the estate planning and so on. Do you bill these cases by the hour? Do you ask for a retainer?
For these ones, I would typically probably go through the initial intake, get an idea what was going to need to be done, and quote a flat fee at the end of the intake. For things like a guardianship where I don't know if it's going to get contested, I don't know what's coming back at me, so there's a wide range of what could happen. As with a litigation kind of thing, that would be based on an hourly rate, just because there are too many variables that you can have done 1,000 of them, but something else can so easily pop up. But for something that's that's an estate planning or putting together trusts and promissory notes and contacting people about annuities and things like that, where I kind of know what's gonna be involved, I go through depending on the asset situation and what all will need to be done, and we've usually figured out a flat fee by the end of the initial intake.
Is the goal of a lot of these meetings to avoid having to go to court for instance, you mentioned a conservatorship. Are you able to, I do mostly criminal trial practice and litigation type stuff, but I will often help people that I know as family and friends and do a simple will or a simple trust, and I will do powers of attorneys and so on for these people. Where is it that an expert like you, an elder law expert, can obviously do that little bit extra and foresee the problem down the road? Let's say what is a conservatorship, number one, and how can what is a specific power of attorney that you might do in an elder law case that maybe an attorney that doesn't foresee that kind of problem might? What is it that you see as an expert that needs to be done in those cases?
Well, first of all, a conservatorship, a guardianship is where a court gives somebody authority over the person. That's going to be their medical, where they live, possibly who gets to visit and who doesn't. That's where you're going to get into the issues of, are we going to limit it out so we're preserving their voting rights, their rights to keep family heirlooms that happen to be firearms, driving, things like that. The conservatorship is handling the money.
And so what can somebody come in, let's say the elderly parent, while they're still not so elderly that they can still make decisions for themselves. Do you draft up an agreement that says, in the event that I become incapacitated, then this person becomes my guardian, and this person
we do put that language into the powers of attorney and into the medical directives, but we also put language in there that says what we're actually trying to do with those documents, which is to not need that stuff. If you have a power of attorney that gives you all the powers that you need, and you have the medical directive and all the power you need for that, then you may be able to bypass and not need a guardian or a conservator at all. The kinds of powers that that sometimes get left out that can become an issue if you're going to try to do benefits planning, gifting powers, because people are looking at this saying, I don't want somebody to be able to give away my money. Well,
Right.
some kinds of transfers have to be done for that to work. Certain powers concerning trusts and changing trusts could tend to get left out too, that could turn up actually needed.
Isn't that often the problem? I mean, you've got an elderly couple or an elderly person, and they don't want to give up control of their assets, and they know that the kids are saying, "Mom," but at the same time, the older they get, they want to hold on to their power, their autonomy, don't they?
Yeah, it can be very scary for them, and it can help to get people when it hasn't gotten quite that scary yet, when they're a little younger, and just start the conversation and start the relationship. One of the things that has come out with the relatively new form is that and I would do it as a rider because you have to have the doctor sign off on it. You can have somebody have the power to check you into, if the facility agrees that you need it, into a mental health facility for 10 days for evaluation, get you stabilized and all that. Well, that's going to scare the daylights out of people. But if you can get that done quietly, and it can be better than having to go into court when you're not at your best and have this procedure done in front of a judge and all the world.
What is the best way for let's say a family to protect the assets of their let's say elderly parent? If somebody is, let's say, way ahead of the game, actually planning on let's say for a family business or
Right.
or the home or something like that. What do you recommend somebody that's actually got some real advanced planning? What do you do? What do you recommend for that family?
Well, the first thing I'll say about that is that we talked about wills and we've talked about powers of attorney and we've talked about the medical directives. Some people hear the word trust and they think, oh, Daddy Warbucks, I don't need that. More people need trusts than they think they do. For some purposes, the revocable living trusts that you hear about a lot, those are great for certain things, more to control what happens after you're gone.
What is a revocable? Define that for us. So a lot of people probably know that, but what is a revocable living trust?
Revocable living trusts, you can revoke them, you can change them. They're not separate from you on your tax return until you die. They are...
So you can give it away, but you still have it?
You can take it back, yeah. Now, they don't give you creditor protection. They're not going to help you with Medicaid. What they can be great for is if you have people you're passing things to that you're worried about their creditors, predators, or what they're going to do with it. If you have minor children or grandchildren that are going to get something and you don't want them having a lot of cash when they turn 18. That's what those ones can be good for.
So a revocable living trust is one where somebody they set it up. They can still go into it. They can change it. They can do anything they want. But it becomes irrevocable when they die. Right. So if you've got something set up, I can go to it. But the day you die, now that trust is there and it can't be touched.
Correct.
Whatever goes in that trust is now taken care of. Okay.
People can probably still put things in it, and there's a trustee who decides based on what the trust says how things get distributed out, who administers that.
So you routinely set up trusts as part of your estate plan. I mean, it's rare that you do a will with any kind of assets where you don't set up some kind of
It would be unusual.
Trust.
I've done a few, but it would be unusual.
And typically, how are they set up? Let's say somebody's coming in, they've got a moderate to size estate, and you're doing a will. What are some things that you do with that revocable trust then when you set it up?
Primarily, most people anymore do not have taxable estates, so a lot of the tax planning that was going on is far less common now. But it's usually got to do with, from what they know of their family members and then what they know of who's down the line, how much protection do they want to make sure that person has versus how much ability to get money out and what for.
So this would be children, grandchildren, that sort of thing?
Typically, yes.
And then you set it up with a certain amount of money to go to each child, or do you have a trustee then that gives the money?
Well, it'll usually have it might be divided among all the children or something, or the descendants step into the shoes if one of them is gone or something like that. Frequently, there are checkpoints at different ages that it distributes out. Some people never want it to distribute out, if they have a child who has who has proven to be bad with money, or has a spouse they don't like, or is in risky kinds of businesses or things like that. Also, special needs need to be addressed in a trust. You probably would do that in a separate trust. That because if you have somebody with special needs, you want to make sure that you're supplementing and not destroying their benefits that they could be getting because of their disability.
And what else do you put in an estate plan besides a trust, or what other kinds of things go into an estate plan? For instance, what if somebody's got a family business that they want to pass on? How do you handle that in an estate plan?
That's really going to very frequently depend on the situation of the family, and the important thing, some of that will get done on the business side, where the business's documents need to say what happens if somebody's gone. Some of it's dealing with the family. The business may be the primary asset, and what gets into the trust and the estate planning and figuring out what insurances might be needed to even things up is if you've got one child getting it because they're the one that's interested, or else figuring out a way that the other kids can have something from it or something from the estate, even though they really don't want to be participating in the business, and also keeping uninterested. There may be spouses who are not interested, and suddenly they end up with a controlling interest in this business, and how do you deal with that? A lot of that gets dealt with on the business's documents, but it's also a consideration to look at how to be fair to your family in your estate and trust documents.
If somebody's trying to leave their assets, let's say equally to their kids, and let's say you got a business over here and you got a house over here and you got some cash and some, you have to somewhat do some valuation, right? Do you occasionally go get the business valued, or
there are certainly circumstances where it would be necessary to go typically to a CPA and get that done.
Yeah.
And also that it's a good idea to get if they're thinking they're going to sell the business at some point, it's a good idea to get real about what it's really worth.
We're here with Jennifer Atkinson. She's an elder law attorney with the Hogg Law firm in Norfolk. And we've been here for the last 30 minutes. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes after this break with Jennifer. You can find her at Hogg Law, www.hogglaw.com, and you can sign up for her elder law newsletter. And our phone number is 454-1650. We're going to go to a short break here. When we come back, we'll have another 30 minutes with Ms. Atkinson discussing elder law issues. And we look forward to you coming right back after these messages.
Are you prepared to defend yourself and your family against any threat? Veteran-owned and operated One Shot Trading Post is ready to make sure that you are. Continuing training and classes on defense, survival, and weapons. Full gunsmithing services, special orders and financing available with military discounts. $15 transfers, and One Shot Trading Post is always looking to buy, sell, or trade. Located at 4366 Holland Road at South Plaza Trail, make sure that you're ready for anything at One Shot Trading Post, 463-5893, OneShotTradingPost.com.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl design shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Hi, this is Greg Picaveras. Join me for Sports Scene each Wednesday from noon to 1.
Tropical storm Ana expected to bring heavy rain and isolated flooding to parts of the coastal Carolinas this weekend, but the biggest threat from the unusually tropical storm this early, dangerous surf. Meteorologist Dennis Felkin, National Hurricane Center.
It's drifting northwest at about 3 miles per hour, so it's going to take some time before the center of the storm reaches the coastline, and that'll happen sometime tomorrow. However, tropical storm conditions will reach portions of the coast later today.
I'm Jim Crisula. Ana's biggest effects across the coastal Carolinas will be rough surf, dangerous rip currents, gusty winds, and heavy rain. 4 kayakers and 2 people in a sailboat had to be rescued in high seas near Charleston, South Carolina. Ana is predicted to come ashore near the border of North and South Carolina near Myrtle Beach sometime Sunday morning.
Ana, earliest tropical storm since 2003, also named Ana. CBS News Update. I'm Jim Taylor.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog. It's been a hard day's night. I should be sleeping.
Well, okay, we're back. I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All. And we're here for the next 25 minutes or so till our CBS News break. I'm here with Jennifer Atkinson, who's an elder law attorney with the Hogg Law Firm in downtown Norfolk, and we've been discussing elder law issues. And, of course, basically estate planning issues that every one of us at some point needs to think about our will and our advanced medical directive and how we're going to be treated if something bad happens to us. But something during the break we were talking about, which is kind of interesting, is the scams that many elder people are subjected to, which Jennifer was telling me about. Tell us about some of these scams that old people or elderly people get subjected to that I guess sometimes you get involved with as an attorney, right?
They certainly can come up in the conversation. One of the big ones that actually several elder law attorneys got hit with, now that didn't go very well for the scammer, but was the IRS scam, where people were claiming to be from the IRS, and they're calling all ages, not just elderly people, and demanding a bunch of money, saying that you owe these taxes, and the people didn't owe taxes.
And didn't they say they had to pay it like today by money order or something like that?
Yeah,
it was a
yes.
way that you couldn't get the money back. I mean, it
Right.
wasn't by check or credit card. It was you had to submit a money order within like by 5 o'clock today, and people went and did it, and their money was gone. I mean, it really worked.
There was some of that. Now, people who were a little more savvy with it were asking for ID numbers, asking for numbers to call back. The thing is, the IRS is not going to call you without first sending you a whole bunch of letters, including certified letters.
Yeah, you're not going to get a phone call from the
Right.
IRS. It's going to be a letter.
In the big cases, when a revenue officer is assigned, they show up and they have a badge and a card.
Right. Well, how was it? So how did this scam work? Tell us a little about the details of how it duped a lot of people.
Well, it really intimidated a lot of people because and most anybody's intimidated by the idea of the IRS.
Right.
The IRS is scary.
Yes.
And then you couple that in with people who are sometimes older people may be more likely to be picking up their phones instead of screening, maybe less likely to question authority. Certain generations are more so than others. But also just the fact that this is the IRS.
Right.
And depending on how much the word started getting around that it was going on, but a lot of it, depending on how much you were hearing from online communities or from colleagues or things like that, well, a retired person may not have as many of those contacts and may not be getting that information as readily.
Yeah, you were mentioning that elderly people are so often victims of their own isolation.
I would say that with a lot of the decisions, one thing to keep in mind, there's talk about aging in place, good, bad. There's no one answer for everybody on that. The main thing to remember is isolation is the devil.
Right.
The more you're in community, in contact with family, friends, people from church, people around the neighborhood, the more eyes that are on you, the the less chance of trouble. The more people who can watch and come and say something to you. If there's a problem, there's more people you can easily reach out to and ask. More likely you're going to hear about things that are going on. And more likely people have the real picture, so you're not dealing with just one person's assessment of what's going on.
So as an elder law attorney, you're probably some of your biggest advice for your clients, especially the children of your elderly people, is stay close to mom or dad and go visit a lot and call them every day and double check on what's going on, right? So they don't get isolated.
Yeah, spread it among a number of people. One caregiver who's doing all of it can, even if they are a very well-meaning person, can burn out, can run into trouble, and may not have good perspective. So if you're going out there every day, but you're the only person they're seeing because there's a mobility issue, talk about how to either get some more people coming around or get to a situation where they're going to see more people. And moving them into the child's house is not always the answer, because you go to work all day. And I've known several people who tried that and then decided of their own volition, heck with this, I'm moving to the adult community where I'm going to see people all day.
Right. So, yeah, get more family members involved, even if they're out of town.
Friends.
Friends, neighbors.
Yes.
Right. And are there professional services that can do this? If you've got, let's say, no family or friends that can do it, can a sibling or a child hire somebody that can do this professionally?
People do use in-home care services for a wide range. Sometimes it's just to clean and do some light housework on up to helping with bathing or other ADLs and things like that. Those services are available. Different companies use them. You'll want to ask around. Some are very, very reputable. Some kind of keep popping up every day, so you may not know.
And do you recommend? Do you have some groups that you use, or you help with that?
I know of several, and I also know some care managers who can be very helpful with that.
The numbers, the phone number is 454-1650. If you have an elder law question or an estate planning question for Jennifer Atkinson, give us a call. She's here in the studio. I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All. The number again is 454-1650. What other scams are elderly people subjected to from time to time in your experience?
One that I actually talked to a banker about earlier this week, and it sounded like that at least in her branch, they had a very good handle on that, is that they have people coming in with big checks, substantial amount of money, saying, I apparently won this from the Canadian lottery, and I need to deposit it and then send $2,000 back over this instruction or something. And they are, luckily, at least at that branch, looking very closely and saying, well, did you play the Canadian lottery? Things like that.
And so they actually will send if they don't catch it in time, they will send the $2,000 check back to the scam artist before the check clears, and It turns out the check is no good.
Right.
Well, what's and why in the world would the bank send the money back out? I mean, it's an unrelated transaction, right? I mean, they'll deposit the check from the lottery proceeds, we'll say, and then they actually write a check back out of their account, and they're not related transactions. So the bank isn't even the wiser to advise the person that they're being scammed. Is that how that works?
Depending on how it's done, it sounded like in this case there were wire instructions or something where the banker would be involved and say, hey, wait a minute. But sometimes there are ones where you actually write the check to get your check. There are different ones of those around.
It seems like there's so many more opportunities to scam people now. I guess back in the old days, they either had to come right to your door. Does that still go on?
Oh, they're still the ones that come to your door. The roofers that come and say, I see your roof needs fixing. And by the way, there's this reverse mortgage guy I know, great guy, who could help you pay for it. Now, a reverse mortgage can be a great tool, but you want to go through a legitimate broker, and that's not the person who's coming with the roof guy. One big red flag is that by law, a reverse mortgage agent has to refer you for outside counseling, for like an hour outside counseling session. If they're not talking about that, they're not legit.
Well, now, what is a reverse mortgage? I know we see these ads. Who's Jim Kincaid or whatever? And there's companies that do a lot. What is a reverse mortgage, and is it ever a good thing for somebody that's elderly?
It can. They actually had some changes in the regulations. What it does is it can take the equity in your home and basically give you access to it, and you don't have a mortgage payment. It can get rid of your mortgage payment. Some people use it to purchase. They take the equity out of their old house. They go downsize, but there's, instead of just plunking it all to the new place, they will keep some cash and use this reverse mortgage to do that. And I'm not somebody you can buy a reverse mortgage from. There are certainly people I know to refer for that who can talk more about it. The new regulations have to do with more financial reporting and holding some of the money back in situations where there's a concern about whether because of somebody's credit or because they're very low income, whether they'll be able to pay the property taxes and the insurance, because that's still got to get done.
Well, so if you've got $100,000 equity, let's say, in your home, and you go get a reverse mortgage, do they give you some cash up front, and you don't have to pay the mortgage?
They can do that, or there can be a line of credit, but how much you can get and whether it's worth it depends on amount of equity is part of it. With this holdback, apparently credit and income ability to pay the other things you have to pay is part of it.
What happens when the equity runs out and they eventually make you move out of your house when you're old?
No, you get to stay in the house as long as you stay in the house. One of the people on the mortgage is still in the house and alive. You get to stay there. There's a fairly quick time limit for people to have to, and I'm not talking like 30 days. It's 6 months. But once you die or once you're out, that it has to be dealt with. It has to either be refinanced or sold or something.
So the property goes directly to the reverse mortgage company. It doesn't go to the heirs, right? Or
well, there is an opportunity for them to either refinance it with a regular mortgage and pay off the reverse, or to go sell it on the open market and keep the balance of the equity. There is an opportunity to do that.
And what is the best way to protect the assets of an elderly person if somebody's coming to you? Let's say you got some time.
If you have some time, there actually are some options with some set-aside type trusts. But the thing you got to watch for that is if you're putting everything into that, first of all, you're losing control of the asset, which not everybody likes. So most people probably don't want to put every penny. The second thing is with
you've said you don't advise just everybody dumping everything into a trust at, let's say, 60 years old. You don't advise that.
Right. First of all, it's not giving up control of everything yet. When you've got that long left, I can absolutely understand why you don't want to do that. Secondly, we don't know what the law is going to be by the time you get there.
Because it's changing all the time with regulations and the IRS tax code.
And Congress keeps looking at it. This is a very expensive Medicaid, and then the VA aid and attendance benefit actually just had a big new proposed regulations that changed things, brought a huge firestorm. We don't know what the final product's going to look like yet. But these are expensive propositions. So the federal government is always kind of looking at these, or there's always the threat they're going to come back and extend the look-back period. With these proposed VA regulations, they are talking about putting a look-back period, where it used to be that you could shunt everything into a trust and get your aid and attendance benefit, which is not going to be enough to cover your nursing home, but it can help, the next day. Now it's looking like that's not going to be the case.
If you've just joined us, I'm with Jennifer Atkinson. I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All. And she's an elder law attorney from Norfolk and a graduate of the William & Mary Law School. You mentioned something called a look-back period, and I think when we were doing on the break, you were talking about a sweet spot, and I think you also talk about a 5-year period. So What do you mean by a sweet spot, and what is a look back period?
What I was saying with the sweet spot is you don't want to be. It helps to get ahead of it enough that you get past that 5-year look back period for Medicaid. But
and what does that mean? Does Medicaid look back to see if there have been transfers made? Okay.
Exactly.
Tell us about that.
When you put in a Medicaid application and you qualify, they look at all your transactions over the past 5 years. Apparently, there's a group studying what the possibility of extending that longer, even.
Because the government wants to save their Medicaid money, right? They want to go back and say, wait a minute, you've been transferring all this money out of your state to your family members or to other
that's
people.
What they're trying to stop.
So that the government pays for your elderly care. And we want you to pay for your elderly care. Is that what they're saying?
So what would happen if you gave away, let's say, and I'm just going to make the number simple for math. This isn't exactly correct, but let's say that Medicaid was paying $6,000 a month for nursing homes, and it's actually a little less than that, and you had given away $60,000. They would figure out how many months that pays, and that would have paid, and that's time you're ineligible, and you've already given away your assets. Now, people can give assets back to you. If you gave it to the kids and they give back to you, that can reduce the period. But kids have probably spent it.
So you're telling us that you need to give the money away before 5 years. You need to give it. When you say the sweet spot, is that what, 5.5, 6 years?
Well, the problem is you can't predict the sweet spot because something could go wrong tomorrow. That's always going to be part of it. Mm-hmm. So that's something that's always going to have to be addressed, and some things held aside, and trying to have people who...
And you might have someone that goes 10, 15 years before they need it. So that's when you say you don't know the sweet spot.
That's true, but if you've... And that's why I would say even that this is not a substitute. I would not call any of this a substitute for looking at the long-term care insurance products. Some of the older products have not worked out, but some of them are, if you still have them, are great. They are expensive, but they are coming out with new things. If you're in that 50 to 60 range, I'd say look at those.
So you recommend that somebody in the 50 to 60-year-old range start buying some long-term health care insurance?
I actually have long-term care insurance, and I'm not that old.
Wow. So. Is it inexpensive? I guess the younger you are, it's cheaper.
Right. Well, I happened to catch it at a time too. First of all, I was under 30 when I started getting it, so I have a decent policy. It's not an unlimited length. You can't even get those anymore. But so I got it at a very reasonable premium. The younger you are, the lower the premium is going to be. And at one point there was a concern because some of the companies were finding they weren't sustainable. So if you got in one of those products earlier, you might have paid a bunch of money and had nothing to show for it if the company closed or something. They are getting better at that, which means you can't get as long a benefit. But if you're dealing with certain companies, I deal with New York Life. I think Genworth has one as well. There are a few out there that appear to not be going anywhere. The downside is they can be very expensive. Some of the life insurance companies are experimenting with things like living benefit riders and long-term care riders and things like that. I don't know as much about those products yet, but they're worth sitting and talking to a financial planner about.
Kind of depressing just planning for your old age, isn't it? But it's something people have to do.
If you start sooner, you have a lot more options.
Right. So when somebody comes to see you, an elder law attorney or estate planning attorney, it looks like, wow, you can go through a lot of, you got a lot of things going on with, you got your estate plan, you got your advanced medical directive, you've got these powers of attorney, the conservatorship, this way of protecting assets, transferring assets out, long-term health care. What are some other things that people, that you recommend for people to get when they come to see you?
One thing that's becoming an issue now is digital assets. People, a lot of people, that's from not getting paper copies of your bank statements anymore. So people, if somebody's coming along behind you, they don't even know the account's there. It could be your Facebook. Can somebody shut down your Facebook page or put up a memorial page or something at the time.
Because if they don't know your password, or if they don't know your, and you guys, these days we have passwords for so many different things, so many different accounts, and somebody might have a bank account that you don't even know about, right?
Exactly.
Because it's all digital.
Absolutely.
So what you're calling, and I think this is referred to as a digital diary. How do you keep a digital diary? What do you recommend doing?
Well, I see that the digital diary is the term that this book that you've shown me a copy of, 55 at 55, life plan documents you need by the age 55, is calling a digital diary. You basically need a way, and there are products coming onto the market where you can have somebody you trust very much have a master password that they can use if needed, or know how to get to it and then use it if needed, to get to all of your passwords, where your accounts are and things, so that they can do their job if you've chosen them as your power of attorney, as your executor, as your trustee. It would be the person that you trust with those things would be the person you would trust with that master password.
Well, what in the world happens to people? I mean, if this is so important and someone doesn't do it, what do people do if they've got, let's say, mom or dad, die and don't have a will, let's say, didn't plan for it, and they can't access? What ends up happening? Are there court procedures they have to go through to somehow order the provider to provide what the password is, or what do they do if they don't have this kind of information?
Well, first of all, the concern is, do you even know what banks they're dealing with? Are you going to go try to subpoena or do something with every bank? And I don't know how that procedure would work. I did have somebody come in and ended up, he needed a private investigator because he thought his sister was getting at things and telling him that accounts didn't exist that did, or cleaning out everything. And he was trying to do his job as administrator and was having a problem doing it.
So the issue, and there's the issue of business succession, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but if you're the owner of a small business, which it seems like 2/3 of the businesses in America are family businesses, does that sound about right? Or a lot of
I don't
them
know
are.
the exact statistic, but many, yeah.
And how do you go about doing succession in a family business? I mean, is that something you do a lot of?
That's something that most people should start thinking about probably sooner than they think. I know that despite the E-Myth books being out there and saying build it with the plan, with the sale and with the exit in mind, I know that's probably not realistic, but people probably even possibly even before their 60s, before they're possibly even as much 10 years before they're going to retire, probably need to start getting their team together. The attorney is part of the team. The accountant's part of the team. If they're going to go the sale route, the business broker can maybe start talking to a few of those just to learn how the process works and what to expect. With the family, get an idea who the family members are who are interested or not interested. Start talking to the kids about the family business, and things do change. The kid may want to have no interest in the business and just want to run off to the Peace Corps or something for the first few years, but then may come back around and come to the business. So you do keep an eye on it over time. But it's something to really start the family and the team getting together. That's the first part of it. And then realize it is going to be a process and it is going to evolve over time.
Well, and then if you're going to sell the business, then there needs to be a business broker. When somebody comes in and discusses this case with you the first time, do you sort of, as the attorney, kind of quarterback the whole thing and say, okay, we need to get this person? I mean, do you have a team that you put together?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is gather their information and their goals. Who are all the players in the family? And some know my kids don't want it, I want to sell it. And then we start getting those people together. Some may not know, and then we would discuss the different options and what that would entail.
We've been here with Jennifer Atkinson the last hour or so. She's a partner with www.hoglaw.com. That's HOGGE law.com. She's a 1999 graduate of William & Mary Law School, and she's a an elder law specialist. And if you want to go online to her law firm, that's at hoglaw.com. You can sign up for an elder law newsletter. And her email address is jatkinson@hoglaw.com. And it's been a real interesting and informative hour I've just spent with Ms. Atkinson. Is there anything else that you think that we've that you'd like to talk about, Jennifer, that we haven't covered? I mean, I know this is a big area and something you do every single day of your life. Seems like what haven't we discussed that you think that our listeners should know about?
That's wide. I'm going to try to go with the general because there's always a wide variety of directions you could go.
Right.
But the main thing is you probably need to start thinking about it and talking to somebody about it sooner than you think you do. And for yourself as well as the family members, and with the particularly the concerns about the scams, and also just making sure we know what's going on if there is a dispute about how mom or dad are doing or what they need or don't need, is avoiding the isolation situation.
That's the real danger.
Yes.
Mom and dad being too isolated, or basically maybe the single parent, their parent, right? It's not
right.
It's not when
it could be.
a couple.
It could be either. I mean, if you've got a couple that doesn't have good mobility, that could be still, just each other may not be enough.
Yeah. And that's so you have to get the dialogue going. How many times do you sometimes have people come in and kind of meet you first, and then you sort of give them talking points to go discuss it a little bit, right? And then they come back again, and then you sort of
could happen.
Does it have to
and
evolve?
Then also it's a process where as people's plan develops as we go through the process of preparing everything, and people over the years you want to get this. You don't get this done at 25 and stick it in a drawer and forget it. Most everybody in town is saying get your stuff checked every 5 years at least.
Where do you recommend people leave their will in their where do they leave all these documents so that people can find them later? I know we talked about the digital diary. Where do you leave the will? Where do you leave these documents?
You actually can register the medical documents with any number of services where that they can be gotten to by any hospital. With the will, you're only going to have one original, typically. That's the preferred way to do that. So that can certainly be in a safe deposit box or a fireproof safe or something like that. I don't keep originals. I give them to the clients. Different firms do it a little differently. But with that one, it's more an issue of keeping it safe, whereas with the powers of attorney, you probably want to have more than one copy, and you probably want to let your bank see it. And
so do you just leave it in a drawer? Let's say the elderly person leaves it in.
I'd be careful about a drawer.
Okay, not in the home. You don't leave it in.
Well, something that's.
How do they get to the safety deposit box then?
Yeah, what you got to balance is the security of it versus the person who needs it, who's going to have the power of attorney being able to get to it, and so it doesn't hurt to give them at least a copy. And make sure they know where it is and they know how to get to it. So
a safety deposit box with the key in a spot where someone can get to it?
Possibly, or if you have a safe in your home or somewhere that they could get to it. The catch with safe deposit boxes on some of these is that things are guaranteed to happen at 5:15 on the Friday before Memorial Day weekend or something like that, or 5:15 the day before Thanksgiving.
Well, thank you, Jennifer Atkinson, for joining us for the last hour. Like I said, this is George Yates says Justice for All. We'll be back with an interesting guest regarding the Lewis and Clark expedition in the next hour. But thank you very much for being on the show, Jennifer.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll be back in the next hour. We're going to do a CBS News break here. I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All. Stay with us for an exciting guest that knows all about the Lewis and Clark expedition from 1804.